Hey Joseph.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Doing well. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. Thanks for coming back again to talk some more first gen finance.
Thank you.
Before we kind of started this little series when it was still in the discussion phases, one of the things that had come up was this idea around money mindset and how your early experiences with finances and money and earning money kind of shape your belief systems around what that means for you and how that reflects upon you and your loved ones. That's what we were gonna. So, why don't you start us off by kind of sharing with us a little bit about, where your money mindset came from, how that was shaped, and what influenced it from your first gen background?
Well, I just remember not having enough, right? I may not have known the totality of what we did not have, but I knew enough to know that we were struggling at times. And so one of the things that, the way that kind of shaped my background was I never thought that I had enough, right? It was never enough. I was always stressing, always trying to get more, always trying to figure something out. And that definitely affected how I dealt with money because now it just became something I used to get to the next paycheck, not realizing that going paycheck to paycheck, it's not a feasible solution. Now, there are times where it can be difficult, so I don't want to make it seem like everything's always copacetic. But having to kind of switch that mindset and see money as a tool and a resource to be used and something that's fluid. You can always get more money. It sounds strange, but there are ways to always get more money. I only thought of money as something that was used to starve off the bill collectors, to put enough food in the refrigerator, or to keep the lights on. I didn't see it as a way to help other people. I didn't see it as a way as a tool you can use to pay for vacation, to relax. My vacations growing up were just going to the family reunions, right? That didn't change till we got much, much older. But once again, just seeing how money was spent at the time to pay bills and to survive, that was a mindset I had growing up. This is only used to pay bills and survive. And so that had an effect, I would say. But what about you?
As I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about generational trauma and how, especially in our society, in American society, that is so built upon the tenets of capitalism, right, as part of our social fabric.
Yeah.
Poverty shaming is something that I think a lot of first generation professionals contend with, even if
Yeah.
it's not, overtly directed at them. It's
Yeah.
kind of that specter if it's something that, their parents or grandparents. And I grew up in a multi-generational household. My grandmother lived with us. So, I think that a lot of their own struggles and challenges with how they were perceived was very evident in my upbringing. I know my mother struggled with this, and my grandmother did as well. They were desperate, desperate, desperate to always present as middle class, even though there were obvious signs that we were not.
You're right, right, right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's I think something that, we can unpack a little more here.
Yeah. I think that the whole poverty shaming thing, I remember going to the Goodwill and putting like a hood over my head so people wouldn't see me. I remember we had sheets that you could see through because we were so poor. And so, but you wanted to keep this appearance. And as a child, I wanted to avoid it. And then I could see when I got older how I was trying to appear more than what I was financial wise. Whether it was buying a way too expensive car that I didn't need, whether that was trying to live in a place that I couldn't truly afford. I didn't think like that, right? Because I didn't think that, hey, why not just get a car that maybe I can fix up until I get a better car? Why not just buy things and live in places where I can actually afford it so I can save up to get those things, to move to a better place, to buy the clothes that I want? You don't have that thought in your mind because back to the poverty shaming thing is you don't want to look that part. You don't want to look like you're impoverished. And so that was really hard. It was really hard because you always want to wear what I would call your Sunday best. And so that was hard to overcome after a while, to change that kind of thinking, to realizing that if money really is a tool, I can use this as a resource. I just need to save some of these resources up. I just need to think about it differently. I don't have to have it now. I can wait. Um, because even if I'm shamed by someone for the lack of wealth I have, it's a matter of time. The older I get, the more I realize it's really a matter of time. If I invest, if I whether right now whether it's crypto, whether it's buying good stocks, I can invest. I can use my money differently to get me to where I want to be, as opposed to trying to cover up where I am.
I want to kind of circle back to that in a minute in terms of like, what do you do when you're beyond survival mode and now you're, past just making ends meet and you have some money that you can either save or invest or do something with. I want to come back to that, but there was something that you said before that kind of dinged my ear, which was this idea of, I think, first generation professionals, because we grow up in lower income backgrounds, there's always money and finances are always constrained or compromised. At that kind of low key judgment aspect, it doesn't matter where you
Yeah.
live or where you grow up, because I'm thinking, even though I grew up on Long Island, which people tend to associate with being this very affluent place, not when my parents moved out there. They weren't moving to Levittown, which was, developed and like where more of the established folks were starting to buy homes. They moved out, like way out in the sticks where nobody wanted to live. That's why they were able to buy so cheap. And then as the years went on and more affluent people started moving in, kind of elevating everything, our gap became more exposed because we didn't have the money to maintain renovations on the house or repairs on the car, the landscaping. It was just kind of like these little clues, right? That we weren't quite doing what everybody else was doing financially wise. But I think that there's also this idea of, in our society, the idea of poverty bias is so based on appearances and the character judgment that comes along with that of being labeled either lazy or
hmm
even worse, unsuccessful.
Right, right. And I think the hard part was when you're first gen, you come from places where hard work is what you do, right? So laziness isn't something that you are. It's not. It's really not even embedded in you. You're going to work hard to accomplish a certain goal, and I think that's why some first gens are so successful because we have that in it, and that's a good quality to have. But to your point, you don't want to be labeled lazy or even incompetent because you don't have the wealth others have. But I think when you take the time to understand that money grows and money takes time, that wealth is something that is not just based on your income or what's inside your bank account. Wealth is there's wealth of knowledge, wealth of health. And then when you put that with income, you have that wisdom, that knowledge, you know what to do with your money, to know how not to live outside of your means, to understand that money can always be attained, um, whether it's through investments, whether it's saying I'm going to have some liquid stocks that I'm going to put aside on purpose, so if I need it, I can get to it. There's just so many things that you can do differently. But once again, it's that mindset. Okay, I don't want to be shamed. I don't want to be looked down upon by anybody. And sometimes that gap is made apparent to you. You go to somebody else's house and you see what they have compared to what you don't have. Growing up, I thought everybody shared a room and shared a bed. That's not the case. I found that out. I didn't know what a guest room was because we didn't have one because everybody had to share. So it's one of those things where it just you have to let yourself develop that time. And then you have to separate yourself from mindsets growing up that may not be healthy for you as regards to money, about how to spend it, about how to save it. You may have to think differently. I remember my grandfather used to sometimes save money in a jar, right? So that's not something I can do, right? Because it doesn't grow the way I need it to grow. But I understand for that time being why he did it. I think that's something that first gens needs to understand too. Our parents may have, and our parents and our grandparents may have spent differently. They may have saved differently, but it's about understanding that context. I'm constantly telling people you can't necessarily judge yourself by the past of what you saw your parents do, what you saw your grandparents do, because the context, the time, the culture was not the exact same as it is right now. So we have to look more forward and think a little bit differently. even if that disagrees with our culture, even if that disagrees with how we were raised, you got to think just a little bit differently. I'm reminded of a story when I told my grandfather that he can get direct pay or direct deposit into his for his check. And I just remember what he said to me. He said, "Ain't no man gonna touch my money," and
Oh
I
my
was
gosh.
it's like, no, no. I was like, Granddad, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you can actually get it deposited in so we don't have to keep going to the bank to deposit your check. You don't have to keep doing that. But
Yeah.
once again, the time, the culture, the context, that all plays a big part in that. And so I think that what we struggle with as first gens is separating not from our culture, just from the time and the context of what was going on. Because once you start to do that, you're going to do things a little bit differently. So it's just something that I learned. And so I go back to that moment when I'm struggling with separating. I just remember that direct deposit conversation that I had with my grandfather.
Such a good one. That is so spot on because, oh God, there's just so much to comment on there. But there's, I think really what I'm taking away from you, what you just shared is it's important to recognize kind of generationally how money mindset looks and works. But I think that while it's very true, of course, that like, yeah, you're not going to save your money in a jar. That's not practical for modern times if you want to
Yeah,
actually do something with it. But
yeah,
it's the behavior of
yeah.
saving that I think previous generations were much more attuned to than maybe modern ones. And I'll include myself in that because one of the big points that I wanted to bring on to our discussion today was this idea that I feel like with first gens, not always, but often, there's one of two ways the money mindset can go once you're in your professional lane and you're starting to build on that. You can either start to over index on your superpower strength of resourcefulness and continue to operate from a scarcity mindset where you have this excessive worry
Yes.
and you're kind of like overly frugal about things,
Hmm.
or you try to bury the past and overcompensate for all the struggle through excessive consumerism,
Right. Oh, yes.
conspicuous consumption. So tell me your thoughts on that before I go on.
So I think sometimes when you get that first big check, you get happy. And I just want to spend, spend, spend. And I think for me, that mindset was I didn't have this growing up, so I'm going to get it now.
Yeah.
And that is hard to combat because you do want to kind of go back and reclaim things in your childhood or your teenage years or your college years that you couldn't have. Or you can overcompensate too, I would say, when you have children and when they get to a certain age, I didn't have this, so I'll make sure they have it all. So I'm going to give, give, give. I'm going to get, 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 get. And that is, it's at the end of the day, it's wasteful. I like what you said, the behavior of saving, right? So if I can understand the culture, the context and the time, what was going on in the culture, I can pull that aside and I can look at the behavior and say, but this was a good idea. The behavior of saving. I may not do it the exact same way. My savings may be wrapped up in crypto, not into a savings account. It may be wrapped up in stocks and bonds or CDs, but not a savings account. So I may be saving differently, but the behavior is there. And I think that's what we really need to grasp on because you're right. It's either I'm going to overcompensate and all my bills get paid. I do remember the first time my wife asked me to do the bills, I paid everything down to zero and we had nothing to eat.
But it was so
Because
satisfying to pay everything
yes,
down
it
to zero.
was because I have a big check. But she was like, you have to think differently. You can arrange times where things get paid. We don't have to pay everything right here, right now. Not everything is due today. But I wasn't thinking like that. I was thinking the lights are not going to get cut off on me. We're not going to be in the code. We're going to make sure everything is paid. We're not going to have to worry about anything.
And I have the money now. I might not have it
Yes,
later.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like I wasn't going to get paid again, right? But the problem was, like you go back to your point, I was overcompensating. And then I've been on the other end where I've done it to the extreme of just spend, spend, spend. Why? Because I have it. I didn't have it growing up. And so you have to bring yourself back to that middle and remember that behavior is saving. Separating the time, separating what was happening in the culture, separating that, but understanding that the behavior was an excellent behavior that we can model. We just have to model that behavior differently, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And thank you for admitting what I think happens to a lot of us first gens when we get that first job where it's like, okay, I'm not worrying where my groceries are coming from, and I'm not worrying if I'm going to be able to make rent. Like, what happens from here? It's almost like, and I think we're all vulnerable to it. Like, you want to prove to yourself that this is real. So you go out and you make some impulse purchases, almost to like test the universe and see if anything's going to happen. My first, like, real professional job, not entry level, like I was a manager.
Hmm.
I told myself that if I got the job, I was going to reward myself by going to the Chanel boutique in Soho, had to be that particular location, and I was going to treat myself to the glasses that J Lo had in her Jenny from the Block video
Okay.
because they were
Okay.
all the rage back
I
then.
see you out there. Yeah, okay.
And it's like I think back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, what a
Yeah.
silly purchase
Yeah.
in so many ways. But it was like I had to prove something to myself in that moment that I had made it. And what it says to me now, looking back over 25 years later, is like so much of my worth was attached to what I could produce and what I could earn and how I could demonstrate that. And I learned, I consider myself lucky that I learned fairly quickly that was not going to be a sustainable model if I wanted to continue to enjoy that feeling of not having the sense of like, bills or payments breathing down my neck. I was going to have to find a balance between rewarding myself but kind of knowing the difference between what was a better purchase and what was a luxury purchase, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also what is an investment? Like,
Right.
so
Yeah.
I look at education. I always tell people education is really an investment. I know it's expensive, and please believe me, I know, but it's an investment in my future. And so I'm going to use this money as a resource to invest in my future. Some things, yes, I do believe there needs to be a balance because sometimes you do need to reward yourself. You worked hard, it's okay, but you need to do it within moderation. I can't reward myself every paycheck for doing a good job. I'm gonna go spend this much money and splurge on this. But it's okay to say, I don't know, maybe once a month or so, you know what? Been working really hard. I want to make sure I take care of myself. Or show appreciation to somebody else. It doesn't always have to be you. And then realizing what is a good investment. What can I put my money towards that's an investment, whether it's in my future or someone else's future, whether it's giving to a non for profit, whether it is helping someone out who's in college or helping someone out by paying one of their bills. You need to have that kind of mindset that I'm not going to be controlled by money, whether it's to the extreme of saving to the point where we're hurting, or whether it's to the extreme that we're spending to the point of hurting. I'm going to make sure that this money is not going to control me, but I'm going to control it. And nor does money dictate what I do or what I do not do. Because I think we do get in the mindset, get, as we say, get the bag, right? Get
Yeah.
all of it. But sometimes that can lead you to taking positions and doing jobs that you probably shouldn't be doing.
Yes. And I'm sorry
No,
not to
you go ahead.
interrupt you,
Go
but
ahead.
this is so important because we're not often in the position financially. We don't have a cushion where if, we're taking these roles for the money and we're miserable, we can't walk away.
Yeah,
Whereas somebody else who has more of a more stably financial background or cushion might be able to say, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm going to walk away of my own volition. A lot of times
right.
we don't have that option.
A lot of times you don't, and that's where you say must be nice, right? It
Yeah.
must be nice, right? But it's one of those things where we have to get to the point to understand that I just can't go after the money. I just can't, because if I do, I might put myself in more ruin. Because at the end of the day, um, we're not going to be saying I wish I made more money. It'll be more so I wish I spent my time differently,
Amen.
right? And
Amen.
so we want to spend our time wisely. And so that's why I always encourage people. I know you may want this position, but is it because, and if it's because of the pay, then this isn't a position for you.
What is the
Now,
amount of life you're going to have to exchange for that paycheck? And is it going to be aligned with your values? I think if I had come to the realization, because you know what? I admit it. And there's a little bit of embarrassment in saying this, but I did not realize I didn't get with clarity what my purpose was with regard to money until I was already in my 30s. I was
Yeah.
well, halfway into my career by then. And it was to get free. I realized I don't need a fancy car. I don't need a huge house. I don't need to go on 3 vacations a year. I want to get free. I want to have FU money. FU money was a concept that changed everything for me. The freedom to be able to say, you know what? If this situation and wherein I earn my income is no longer working for me, I can walk away and my bills will still be paid. Once I realized the power in that, that
Hmm.
became my focus. And when corporate was no longer serving me, on a functional or a fulfillment level, personally fulfilling, I had mastered that discipline to the point where I could walk away and say, I've had enough and I'm going to try something else. And I have the freedom to do that because I gave myself that option,
Right.
right?
And
I
yeah.
saved for the rainy day.
Right. So essentially, you invested in yourself. Right. So in the case that you need it, you can go ahead and liquidate something real quick and have that money for you waiting right there. It was just an investment you had in yourself. And that to me, that's why I tell people I love stocks, that love crypto, because I can see my money. I can see if it's doing well. I can see if it's doing bad. And if there does come a point where I'm like, okay, I need to walk away, I have something that I can go back to. There's a reason we put that money aside. Because at the end of the day, we're not taking anything with us, right? When it's
Right.
all over, you're not taking your paycheck. Your final paycheck will not go to you, right? And so it's really understanding that money is just a resource and a tool, but it's only temporary. So to your point, how much of my life am I willing to give up? What am I willing to say you will compensate me for giving up this much of my life? But we need to just to think differently, and it's hard. It's hard. I want to acknowledge that it's hard.
100%. So
Um, like
hard.
like you said, you get towards your upper or mid 30s, then you start to see things differently. If this Joseph could go back to talk to the Joseph who's in his 20s and thinking he just needs to go ahead and just spend how he wants to spend, I think things would have done differently. I think it would have saved myself a lot of heartache. And probably have a lot more in the bank that I have now. But at the end of the day, once you get to that realization, that's when you start to make those changes. It's important. It's really important.
There's there's three things that
Hmm.
in anticipation of this conversation I thought, well, if I had the opportunity to share, I guess, lessons, three things that I've learned with other first gen professionals
Hmm.
about money, it would be these. There were two critical reframes that helped me to kind of get my legs under me in terms of what money actually meant, what kind of place it had in my life, and how I wanted to wield it. The first was looking at, and this was while I was in struggle mode, right? Like, kind of what helped to curb that, oh, but I never had this and I'm working so hard and I want to treat myself or I want to reward myself, right? What curbed that was kind of thinking in terms of what the silver lining was in found money, right? So if I was able to pick up another shift at work, or even if I found like, $20 on the ground or something from my mother, I got this idea of like, well, how can you reframe that into a, a net positive in terms of your financial situation? Because a lot of people would say, 20 bucks, yeah, what's that going to do for me? Well, it's like, well, that just covered your subway for the next 3 days. Now you don't have to reach into your pocket. Somebody else paid for it. Like kind of reframing small wins like that really helped me to the second reframe, which was, what number is zero in your bank account? And what I mean by that is I never considered zero to be zero in my account. Zero
Hmm.
was always a larger number. It might have been in the beginning like, $100 or a couple of $100. But for me, it's like when that threshold was hit, I had no money. Even though I technically had $200, mentally, I started to condition myself to say, nope, that's not money for you to spend. That's cushion money. So then as I was able to, achieve higher positions and now I'm eligible for bigger bonuses, and I'm not looking to pay off a credit card in its entirety at the end of the year, I can actually save some of that money. That number, that zero number started to increase. To where it was like, okay, well, if I have less than $5,000 in my bank account, that's considered zero. Like I don't have any more to spend.
Right.
And
Right.
that really, that kind of incremental thinking helped me to a place where, when I wanted to eventually buy a piece of property, I had the money
You
to
had the
do
money
it.
to do it. Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, the three things that I thought about
I
was,
didn't share the third one. The third one is
oh,
around something you said,
okay. Sorry. Sorry.
but I'll just put it out there real quick because
Yeah.
when you were talking about your grandfather and the whole direct deposit thing,
Hmm.
I felt that. I felt that so hard because for me it wasn't really ever, is someone going to take my money? Is who can I trust to give me sound financial advice on
Yeah.
money? Because I needed to know that somebody understood the kind of skin in the game that I had. Like if you're somebody who kind of like maybe didn't grow up wealthy, but like money was kind of always there when you needed it and you didn't really stress it that much, like you might be looking at financial investments or taking risks a little differently than me. Was like, this
Hmm.
is all I have. I cannot make a mistake.
Right. Right.
So finding somebody to trust that you can get sound financial advice from, I think is so critical for a first generation professional. That was my third thing.
No, well, now I have three. That's my third one too. Find someone you can trust. I think for me, the other two were, it's just the money is very fluid, and that so money's going to change. It's going to change over time. It's going to change how much we have, how much we don't have, and understanding that means I don't have to let money control me. And there's some things, as I remember one, I had this one class where someone was like, instead, and we did this before streaming was very popular. Like we would just only watch Netflix. We wouldn't marry my wife when we were married when we were younger. We only watched Netflix. We wouldn't go to the movies. We wouldn't get like cable. We would only do Netflix. And I remember people saying that's crazy. Well, one, it's going to be out soon anyway, right? It's not going to stay in the theaters forever. Two, with cable, I got to pay for that and have advertisements that break it up. Now I don't. And so with the amount that we were paying, we've been loyal to Netflix. I mean, I think we should have stocks in Netflix by now. But we were just loyal to them because it was a way that we would save money, right? Or someone would say, go to the library and rent it there. There were just different ways that you
Yes.
can do things, right? You don't have to do it the way you see everybody else doing it. And then just remember that money is liquid. Like I said, there's some stocks I would buy that I would use only when I needed cash, right? I wouldn't, so that way I'm not going to my bank account. I'm not going to my savings necessarily. I'm just using the stock. And there's other stock like, that I would just have that I wouldn't spend at all. That one's there and it's meant to grow. So I'm going to watch it daily. As someone told me, if you don't understand stocks, if you don't understand crypto, just get an account. And if you just watch it after a while, some of the stuff starts to make sense to you. You have to educate yourself too. And that goes back to your third point, someone to teach you about money. So I had to reach out to someone to teach me because I was unaware of what I didn't know. I love that saying, you don't know what you don't know, right? And there were some things I just did not know. And so that changed my relationship with money, causing me to be a little more, I don't want to say frugal, just a little more wise. How to get wiser with my income.
When you know better, you do better.
So that's very true. It's very
I
true.
love that Maya Angelou quote's my favorite. But it's, I think if there was like kind of like a headline, I would want to put out there to other first generation professionals is really get clear on how you want to be in your relationship with money.
Hmm.
Like, what's going to help you feel free? Because I'll tell you right now, you cannot buy your way into confidence. You cannot spend enough to cover fragility or a sense of vulnerability or a fear of being exposed. So if that's your aim, you're probably always going to feel like you're not quite achieving your goals, and that's an awful place to be. Tied to that is that there is power in choosing not to show status even if you could.
Yeah.
I that was probably the lesson that was most transformative for me. I drive a beat up 2008 RAV4. I don't care. I ain't got no car note. That is a flex. Especially right now with interest rates the way they are.
Yeah.
I got no problem. It's all right. It gets me from point A to point B. The heat works fine. The brakes work fine. I think there are, definitely times in my life where I would have, kind of felt a little shame around that. But, as you kind of start to see the big picture and realize what is it that's going to get me free, right? Where am I going to start to feel like I can get free? That is something that I think really starts to shape your relationship and your perceptions around finance. Thank you so much again for always
Hmm.
coming on here and being so willing to contribute and be candid. I've really enjoyed this series and I hope
Yeah.
that we can do it again sometime.
Yeah. I totally agree. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.